Hello, everybody. My name is Jose, and on behalf of everyone here at the Central Park Conservancy, I want to welcome you all on our weekly walk through the Dene. Now, the Dene actually sits near the southeast corner of the park, right off the mall and the zoo. Now, it's sometimes overlooked compared to other areas, but there are plenty of hidden secrets. Now, today we are going to be exploring this curious landscape that sits right next to some of the most heavily trafficked areas right here in the park. All right, so just before we get started, just a couple of reminders. All participants are muted, but you can use the chat feature to say hello and comment. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A function, and my colleague Ryan is actually on the back end. He's going to answer any questions as we go along. Now, the images that you folks are going to see today, these were taken by myself within the past week, but you'll also see some other images, and these were taken from our official Central Park Conservancy photo archives. Now, closed captioning has also been enabled for accessibility for folks who are hard of hearing. So if you'd like to get rid of them, simply change your settings on Zoom. Okay, so as many of you know, the official mission here at the Central Park Conservancy is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. And of course, we've been hard at work at this since 1980. So let's go over our route for today. So we're going to start off over at 64th Street on the east side of the park, right outside of the Arsenal building and the zoo. Then we're going to make our way up towards the Dene, which includes landmarks like the Summer House and the Balto statue, the Billy Johnson playground, and then we're going to go ahead and end things off over at the Dene slope. Now, the Dene slope is best known as a native meadow that really comes alive in the warmer months. In fact, we've done a few walks here before, mostly in the summertime. Now, since today is, of course, a cold January, very wet day here in New York City, we're going to get a peek of what it's actually like in the off season. So let's start off right here at 64th Street and 5th Avenue. This, of course, is the site of the Arsenal building, which today actually houses the headquarters of the New York City Parks Department. Now, the Arsenal is also one of the few structures in Central Park that actually predates the park itself. It was actually constructed as a munitions depot for the state militia in the early 1850s. So just a few years before Calvert Vaux and Frederick Law Olmsted actually came onto the scene. So let's now make our way down the path around the side of the building, and let's see what else is around the corner. Now, just behind the Arsenal, we can see a few buildings and gates actually centered around the promenade. Now, this area is part of the Central Park Zoo, which is managed by the Wildlife Conservation Society. Now, as any kid visiting the park knows, the zoo is, of course, a prime destination, and you're going to find upwards of 1,500 animals here, representing upwards of about 160 different species. Now, this gate is on the northern edge of the zoo, and over on the right, you can actually see one of the more whimsical structures in Central Park. This is called the Delacorte Clock. Now, this lovely work of art was gifted to the park back in 1965 by donor George Delacorte, who was actually inspired by the old animated clocks of the medieval town squares that he saw while visiting Europe. Now, every half hour, the monkeys at the top of this clock, they actually ring the bell, and you can see all sorts of animals playing music and dancing along on this work by the Italian sculptor Andrea Spadini. I think it's a very fitting piece of art to display right here at the zoo. It's definitely very whimsical, and kids just absolutely love it. All right, and of course, right around the corner from the clock, you can see another very whimsical statue. This is Honey Bear. Now, Honey Bear was actually installed in the park a few years earlier in 1937, and eventually it was moved to this spot in the 1980s. Now, as you can see behind the statue, over on the left-hand side, you can actually see the clock itself. So the whole lighthearted animal theme here really does make sense, especially in this area that we're standing on. Alrighty, and moving on, and we pass by the Tisch Children's Zoo over on the right-hand side. Now, this part of Central Park is great for younger visitors that really want to pet and feed cute and cuddly animals like sheep, goats, and more. It's also got the only cow that lives in Manhattan, so go figure. One other thing that really actually kind of stands out to me here at the Tisch Children's Zoo is the gate. You can actually see that right here. Now, this is actually sculpted by the Art Deco master, Paul Manship, whose work is actually represented in other areas of the park as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on. And from the zoo area, we're going to go ahead and make our way up the Dene landscape proper. And of course, in order to get there, we're going to need to walk right past this arch, which carries the 65th Street Transverse Road. Now, in Central Park, as many of you know, bridges and arches often serve as a segue into other landscape. And of course, this one, I think, is no different. And as soon as we enter, the landscape gets a little less whimsical and opens up to a small grassy meadows. You can see slopes. And of course, there's also plenty of benches to sit on in this area as well. Now, looking down on the ground along the pathway, you can see that these stones are set in a circular fashion, marking what's called the Wallach Walk. Now, it was actually named after park donors Miriam and Ira D. Wallach, who funded the restoration of this area back in 1993. And if we continue heading north along Wallach Walk, we'll eventually see this little pathway taking visitors up a rocky hill. So let me go ahead now and follow it and see where it leads to next. Now, sitting high on top of this large outcrop of Manhattan schist, you can see what's called the Dene Summer House. Now, we've seen this rustic wooden structure before in previous weekly walks during the warmer months, but I do kind of want to show you folks what it actually looks like in the winter time. As you all can see, it actually overlooks the entire Dene landscape with really fantastic, amazing views of the Midtown skyscrapers in the background. Now, in the winter, I think the views are really especially gorgeous because of the lack of leaves on the trees, and the panorama, I think, really opens up. This is probably one of the more underrated vistas in all of Central Park. It really shows you that this place is, of course, full of hidden surprises everywhere you go. You're going to see lots of really amazing views, vistas, if you know where to look, or if you're just kind of exploring. Okay, so from the top of the hill, we now make our way down towards the next stop. And of course, we'll be taking this pathway just a few steps towards the west. Now, here's a statue that's very well loved by our visitors. This, of course, is Balto, who was, of course, the heroic Siberian husky that led a pack of sled dogs transporting diphtheria vaccines towards the remote town of Nome, Alaska back in 1925, essentially saving countless lives. Now, this was sculpted in the 1930s by Frederick Roth, who also worked on other statues in the park, including Honey Bear, which we actually saw earlier on our walk. These days, Balto occupies a very, very prominent part of the Dene, and of course, he welcomes visitors wandering in from the nearby mall. So don't forget to pet him for good luck if you're ever around the area. Okay, so right now, I actually want to go ahead and do our poll of the day. So let me go ahead and pull that up right now. And today on our walk, I want to actually ask, what is your favorite animal statue here in Central Park? Now, the park has, of course, dozens of statues in total, and a few of them are actually of animals like Balto. Some are going to be parts of larger memorials and other works of art. In this case, the Indian hunter statue by John Quincy Adams Ward comes to mind. If you don't know, the Indian hunter statue is actually just off the words at the west side of the mall. My favorite actually happens to be Eagles and Prey, which is located right by the mall as well. All right, so let's go ahead and see the results of the poll right now. All righty, and so it looks like, yeah, actually, yep, many of you actually chose Balto as well. Again, Balto is an extremely well-beloved statue, which is actually one reason why in the image right here, you can see that visitors from all over the planet, from all over New York City, kids, they love petting Balto. And of course, he was a very, very good boy. Of course, the other statue that's very well beloved is the Delacorte Clock over by the zoo. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on with our walk now. And so from the Balto statue, oops, let me go ahead and share the results. There we go. So, yep, 30% of you have said Balto, and 34% also said the Delacorte Clock over at the zoo. So very interesting. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on. We're going to go ahead and now take the steps up from where we are here at the zoo, or rather from the Balto statue. So you can see the steps right here. Basically, what we're doing right now is we're actually climbing up the Dene slope, which is actually quite an interesting natural area that often gets overlooked here in Central Park. But today, of course, we are going to be exploring a little bit of this natural area. And this right here, as you can see, this is the entrance into the Dene slope itself. So let's go ahead now and make our way inside and see what's in here. Now, as we walk around this area, you are going to notice plenty of signs, essentially informing visitors that this is native meadow in progress, and that should, of course, not be disturbed. And these signs are usually placed right by the walking trails. Now, the Dene slope is known for being a wild home to native plants, herbs, flowers, trees, and shrubs. Now, at times, it can look a little unkempt and messy, unlike the very well-manicured lawns of other nearby areas in Central Park, like places like maybe, I don't know, the mall, Sheep's Meadow, Great Lawn, or whatever else. Now, here at the Dene slope, plants like grasses are pretty much left to grow quite tall. And it can really feel like you aren't even in the park anymore. But as we'll find out soon, most of the plantings here, of course, are carefully chosen by our Conservancy staff to establish a natural meadow representing just some of New York State's beautiful native plants. Now, the Dene slope was crafted fairly recently, or rather created fairly recently, back in 2017. Before that, the Dene slope was really just a weedy, eroded hillside. Even though it is a native meadow with lots of native shrubs and flowers, it's also got some ornamental plantings that I think really make it stand out. So here, for example, we have a southern magnolia right near the trail entrance. This tree, of course, this is an evergreen. And so you can actually see its leathery, dark green leaves, essentially kind of standing in contrast to the rest of the dead-looking cold winter landscape around it. But of course, this landscape is not at all dead. It is, as we'll soon find out, brimming with life. Now, you're also going to find these London plane trees over at the edge of the slope. Now, these, of course, are hybrid trees that are really quite popular to plant in many city streets all over the planet. London planes, of course, are also one of the most common trees that we have here in Central Park. They make up a good chunk of the roughly 18,000 trees that we have here in the park. Now, as we walk around, we're going to start to encounter lots of wild winter plants and flowers. Now, this one that we're looking at, this is called rattlesnake master, which is a perennial that was named for the fact that it was erroneously believed to cure snake bites. This plant, I think, definitely kind of stands out in this meadow with its very spiky flowers. Just a little further from the trail, we can actually see this mountain mint. Now, mountain mint is very aromatic, and it can have some very strong minty smells when crushed. It can also make a very nice herbal tea from its leaves, which has actually been used in traditional medicine as an ailment for various different aches and pains for a very long time. Now, here's another perennial that gives off a very minty aroma. This is wild bergamot, and it's related to mint and basil. In winter, it actually stands out in wildflower meadows due to the way that the flowers cluster up. And you can actually really see like just how much they kind of stand in direct contrast with the rest of the landscape itself. Usually in summer, they're going to have very showy colors like pink and lilac that really kind of make them attractive to birds, insects, and other pollinators as well. Now, like other natural areas in Central Park, the Dene slope uses something called bonded carpet. Now, bonded carpet allows us to build a network of walking trails without doing much damage to the topsoil and the plants that depend on it for essential nutrients. The bonded carpet here is often layered with wood chips as well, which of course gives it a pleasant rustic feel. All right, and if we keep walking down this pathway, we're gonna hit one of the highest points in the Dene slope. Now, this rocky outcrop can be a very pretty nice find for the wandering park goer or visitor, since it can have some pretty interesting views of the surrounding landscape. Now, just a little further away from the rock, we can see the 65th Street Transverse Road, which essentially serves as the southern boundary of the Dene. It's really quite interesting to me that there can be this very quiet, natural native meadow in the middle of the park, all while cars and buses and other vehicles are zooming past not more than a couple of feet away. All right, so we are moving ahead now, and why don't we go ahead and actually follow the path for a little bit. Now, I happen to enjoy walking around the Dene slope. With all the tall native grasses, it's really such a different experience compared to other sections of the park. So whereas other areas like the nearby mall are well known for being so pristine and manicured, the Dene feels more relaxed and natural. And of course, it was really intended to be that way. It almost feels like you're kind of walking around in an untouched nature trail or something like that up in the Adirondacks or wherever. Now, overlooking the eastern edge of the slope, you can find this rustic wooden bench, where of course you get some nice, fantastic views of rocky outcrops and tall buildings over on the east. So far on our walk, we've of course been looking at the Dene as a cold winter landscape. Now, as a wildflower meadow, it can of course look very much different, very, very different in other seasons as well. So this, for example, this is the Dene in the summertime. So you can see flowers like black-eyed Susans front and center, which of course are a favorite in August. It definitely looks more alive in other times of the year. I'm definitely not going to lie, but no matter what season it is, no matter if it's a nice, bright, sunny summer day, or if it's a cold, not too nice day out like today in January, the Dene always has this very wild, pristine ambiance to it. And that's really one of the surprising aspects about it that really kind of, catches folks by surprise. Okay, so from here, we're going to go ahead and stay on the trail, and we'll make our way right down the Dene slope. Now, along the way, we can see these wild oats with their very pretty seed heads blowing in the wind. Now, these, of course, are actually quite popular plant as a shade grass, but they can also grow very aggressively for those of you who actually do have these in your backyard. In case you're wondering, wild oats are going to be different from the oats that we might eat for breakfast. These are going to be entirely different species altogether. And right at the end of the trail, I found this nice, very pretty goldenrod with its fluffy white flowers. The goldenrod is actually a very curious plant. It was actually used by Thomas Edison for the creation of an alternative to rubber back in the 1920s and 1930s. So very interesting plant here. Now I want to go ahead and actually kind of end off my tour right here at the edge of the Dene slope, where we get this very nice view of this native meadow. And of course, it's all going to be contrasted with the tall buildings of Midtown. So I hope you've all enjoyed the stroll through the Dene. And as we've seen, it's got a mix of everything that pretty much everyone can love, including nature lovers, kids, and other curious visitors, even in the middle of winter time. So with that, I thank you all so much for joining us on our weekly walk today. Now, don't forget to check out our guided walking tours as well. We do have tours of many areas of Central Park, including Seneca Village, the Ramble. We also have tours of the Northern Forts landscape. And of course, since this is a new year, we're also going to be rolling out some newer tours as well, including new winter tree walks. We also have a few ones coming up as well. So definitely check out our website, centralparknyc.org, for more information on our tours. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and keep the room open for any last final questions. But otherwise, from all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe and be well. Have a good day, folks.